Welcome everyone to another CoH2 Replay Cast. This time we're going to have a 2v2 on Lear No, sent in by Skrundarlo. That's one hell of a name. He's going to be playing as OKW in the North spawn, and his ally is going to be Steel Dragon, already selecting Olstrupen, playing as Wehrmacht. On the enemy team we're going to have Battalion Ukraine, playing as the USF, and Red Howler also playing as USF. So we're going to have a double USF against both Axis factions. That's going to be interesting. Battalion Ukraine has already selected Rifle Company, which I completely dislike on this map. I feel like the EZ8s aren't really that worth it on a map that's got so many obstacles to the actual path of a unit, like all these houses, all these things up here that you can run over that are usually providing cover to your infantry. So in general, it's just a map that limits the mobility of tanks quite a lot, I feel like. And so having the medium tanks can work out in the north, but overall, especially in the south with the forest, it's just not worth it. I feel like the heavies are better. And so the EZ8 is not going to be worth it to pick the Rifle Company for. And Rifle Company really is only picked when you're going for the EZ8, I feel like, at this point. In the center, we're going to have Steel Dragon actually going for the building over here. Building over here does not have that many windows, so usually it's more of a building that people go over just to annoy the enemy, keep them busy, having sort of to punch through a very hard to kill unit in a building, or sometimes for machine guns. Machine guns do tend to work out fairly decently on this building. Unfortunately, the main problem with the building is this bush over here, because it prevents line of sight. So having an MG42 in this building usually isn't that good. Usually it's a little bit better to have an MG42 on this building. And in north we see that Skrundarlo is having some good success in capturing. However, the enemy is actually approaching his area of operations and is approaching with a lot of troops. 2 rear echelons from both players, and then a couple of rifleman squads from Red Howler. Obviously, the Red Howler's riflemen will be very dangerous, only at the sort of close ranges. And to get to close range, they're going to need to take out these Stern Pioneers quickly enough to prevent them from being a deterrent to the close range effectiveness of the riflemen. Because obviously, if the riflemen can get into close range against the Volksgrenadiers, are going to win. But if they get into close range and the Stern Pioneers are still alive, then they're going to die really quickly. Well, the Stern Pioneers have now been forced to retreat. In fact, almost getting wiped out, but they will survive. Right now, the Kubuwagen is also taking a lot of damage from the rear echelon troops in the center, and that's a bit of a problem, but the Kubuwagen will be able to escape with its frontal armor facing the enemy, obviously allowing it to wither the fire of those M1 carbines from the rear echelons quite effectively. Now in the south, we see that there's an MG42 in the house, along with the Olstrupen. They're taking a lot of damage, and in fact the Olstrupen will go down, so that's 200 manpower already down for Steel Dragon. Steel Dragon, despite the fact that he has an advantage in squad numbers comparatively to their enemies. Oh, nice grenade coming in from the rifleman. That's going to be the end of this MG42, I feel like. Pineapple going to be able to wipe out the squad fairly effectively. Now again, Steel Dragon had an advantage in terms of actual squad numbers, so I feel like he should have been able to actually grab a lot more territory in the south than he actually did. He's allowed his enemies to sort of regroup, take out one of his machine guns, and push towards the center. Now, there are 2 more machine guns sort of preventing the allies from actually exploiting that success further in terms of actual advances in the center. But I still feel like the south is completely open to caps from the riflemen. So definitely Steel Dragon could have been a little bit more assertive in his control of the southern side of the map. He could have definitely used his advantage in terms of the Olstrupen and in terms of the Pioneers, using those units to capture, especially the munitions points, being very valuable because they're very much far away from where the action is, very far removed, and so having those under control is going to usually mean that you're going to be able to keep that control for at least a while. Even, you know, if they send some squads, it's likely going to be to actually cut off the points rather than capture them for themselves. So you're going to be denying your enemy munitions either way. And obviously, denying the munitions is not as critical as denying them fuel, but it's still very important. Especially when you're facing Americans who might be going for the tactical support company with the M1919s, because obviously Americans with the M1919s are going to be very scary. Now, there's a fighting position up for Battalion Ukraine, and, well, whoop-de-doop, there's no munitions for the machine gun, because he's been throwing those grenades around quite a bit. And if Battalion Ukraine had those munitions points, then right now he would be able to actually upgrade the 50 cal on the fighting position. But he hasn't, so again, that's just kind of a small example to show you how important munitions can be in a subtle way. Now, the fighting position is not really in danger of actually going down from any German units right now, except this MG42. The MG42 from the flank is going to be able to do a decent amount of damage. I'm not sure exactly how the mechanics for damaging fighting positions work, but it usually requires you getting close in behind the fighting position. Because the closer you get, and if you attack from behind, it seems like you get some kind of way to deal extra damage to it. And that's exactly what this squad was doing, but right now he's moving away, and as you can see, this fighting position is not exactly taking a lot of damage. Now, in the north, we see that the Germans have managed to win quite a big engagement, and all these riflemen were forced to retreat. Now they're coming back full strength because Red Haller actually went for an ambulance, which is probably a decent idea right now. Decent idea because he needs all of his squads top-notch in terms of the performance that they can give up. Because you don't want to have your squads sort of dying out after a few shots. And right now, this is exactly what he needs to start pushing back on the north, because he's going to need a little bit of extra help in dealing with the double team that's actually been happening, because Steel Dragon has been helping out Skrunderlow and actually securing the north. And securing the north on this map is very important because of the fuel point. There's only 2 fuel points, one in the north and one in the center. So the one in the center is going to be pretty much firmly under the control of the Germans, unless the Allies can do something about these machine guns. Obviously, one good way to do that is a mortar. USF mortar being very, very powerful and very scary. Another good way to do that is a flamethrower from the, obviously, the rifle company. Of course, it's on a rear echelon troop, so it's not going to be very sturdy as a flamethrower. Another great way to do that would actually be to get these rear echelon troops in the fighting position and using the grenade launcher, actually, that they get to sort of... Oh, actually, some squad just went down for the Germans. Oh, looks like it was a machine gun in the north. So good play with these riflemen from Red Howler. Not exactly sure how he did it, because the machine gun does look like he was covering the area, so perhaps it was a flank coming in from over here. Again, remember, the machine gun in this building can actually shoot over here because it's over the fence, but it cannot shoot... Also, it can shoot over here because it's over the fence, but it cannot shoot right... right huddled up to the fence. Like, if the enemy units are right up to the fence, then the machine gun will not be able to shoot at them. That is, unless this fence gets destroyed by something. So one good thing to do right now for the Germans, if they had a mortar, would be to mortar this area, actually. Just to have the mortar clear out the thing. Or just have a cube wagon run over the entire area. I'm not sure if the cube wagon actually crushed this, but I'm pretty sure it can. And if it could, then it would be a very actual good thing for Skrunderlow to actually help out his ally by destroying all these fences, thus giving his machine gun a little bit more of a line of sight on the center. But it still does not really matter that much, because we do have this USF mortar working its magic and has actually managed to take out one of the machine guns, perhaps forcing it to retreat. I'm not really sure. Yeah, it does look like it was forced to retreat. So at least for the Allies, we do have a little bit of a hope to actually be able to deal with these machine guns. Another good way to deal with them is smoke. Right now, the 81mm mortar was not able to actually provide that to the center, but in the center, especially when you're capturing a point, sometimes smoking is better than actually mortaring with HE. Now, we do see a little bit of a minefield being planted by a Pioneer that was actually kind of almost dead. I'm not sure actually what happened there, but that was pretty interesting. The Pioneer getting forced to retreat is pretty good because of the fact that, obviously, he could have been building many more mines. He could have also captured this point in the south, so good play from the Allies. Actually, maybe that was a mortar shot dealing with the Pioneers. Possible. We do see some extra experience and extra kills from the last time that we saw the mortar, but I'm not sure. We see a lieutenant, actually, from Battalion Ukraine, and in terms of tech, we see also a captain from Red Howler, who has the ability to go for a Stewart, but not the resources. At the same time, Steel Dragon doesn't really have any teching choices yet. He's going to go for the Battle Phase 1, which is a little bit late, actually. He should have gone for Battle Phase 1 much earlier in the game, I feel like. Because the Battle Phase 1 is just so incredibly important for the Germans. For the Wehrmacht, if there is one tech that you cannot skip on, is Tier 2. Because with the pack gun and the 222 Scott Car, you just get such incredible utility, and both in the mid game with the 222 and in the late game with the pack. Excellent grenade, actually, gonna almost wipe out the machine gun. Very lucky actually that the machine gun was under this truck, behind the truck, because when the grenade has to pass over green cover, for some reason the grenade sort of has a 50% damage reduction, even though it's going over. I just don't, don't quote me on this, but that's usually how it works, and I'm not sure as to why it does that, but that's just how it does. And it looks like a squad will go down from Skrunderlow. Perhaps he's lost another... Oh, no, okay, no, just lost one Volksgrenadier. That's just probably his first unit loss other than the Cube Wagon, and actually one Stern Pioneer. So it looks like actually I was wrong. I thought he had 2 Stern Pioneers. Turns out he only had 1, which is interesting because he's going to go for the Scavenge Doctrine. So that means that he's going to have the Furrow Salvage ability. And if he can actually find his Cubowagon somewhere, I'm not sure where the wreck is, but if he can find that, then he's going to be able to salvage it, and that's going to be really good for him. But I feel like the wreck got destroyed by something, which is a shame, but oh well. It's only going to be munitions to actually salvage the Cubowagon, but other than that, he's going to have pretty good usage out of the Doctrine with the Jaegers. The Jaegers obviously able to spawn from buildings, so it's going to be fairly useful to actually spawn them in the center, just as a quick response unit in case the enemy makes a big push, or in case you want to capture a point, such as this one. It's also going to be really good to have those Jaegers because, well, as the name suggests, the Hunters, they're really good at long range. And obviously, in this map, there's quite a lot of long range in both south and north areas of the map. And even in the center, where there's a little bit more of a close quarters combat situation, you can still make pretty good use of the Jaegers with the whole heavy cover situation. Now, we do see a flak half-track from Skrunderlow, and I feel like that's a mistake, because the flak half-track is a little bit late right now. I feel like he could have waited until he had a Sure Panzer Quarters set up, and used the Sure Panzer Quarters to get out some kind of unit, or perhaps even go for an Ostwind from his Scavenge Doctrine. I feel like the purchase of the flak half-track is not going to be really that useful. If you want to go for a flak half-track, you have to do it very quickly, as soon as you have 55 fuel? 55? Yeah, 55 fuel in the battle group headquarters. You should immediately buy the flak half-track. And that's going to net you a 6 to 7 minute flak half-track, which is going to be much better than a 12-minute flak half-track, because it would have caught Red Howler completely off guard. You wouldn't even have the captain to counter the HT. So obviously, it's going to be much better to face an opponent without any kind of AT weapons than one with AT weapons. And if you are facing an enemy with AT weapons with a light vehicle, such as the flak half-track, then you're not going to be doing that well, especially a light vehicle that is mostly made for long-range engagements, such as the flak. Not like, for example, the Lukes or the 222, which are essentially made for flanking. They can work at long range if the enemy has no AT, but they're also much better at flanking the enemy in sort of key spots because of their excellent mobility and their ability to fire on the move without any kind of penalties. Whereas the flak half-track, he can only fire when sitting still, so that's when he's going to be much more effective at long range, sitting still defending. Now, we do see a Panzer IV from Steel Dragons, who was able to actually very quickly upgrade to a tier 3 with the support armor core. Obviously very good to get some quick armor on the field. Not going to be that great later on in the game once the allies do get a lot of AT weapons, and once they do get some tanks out, especially the EZ8s are going to be very effective against the Panzer IVs. And also the Pershing from Red Howler, who has selected the Heavy Cavalry Company. That's going to be really good against Panzer IVs such as this one. So I feel like this is going to be the only Panzer IV that Steel Dragon goes for. And if he does that, then he's going to be in a pretty good position, because obviously the Panzer IV is really good right now to fight allied infantry and in general just to push the allies back with its mobility. But later on, it's not going to be that great. Now, he will meet the 57mm. 57mm will actually pop the armor-piercing incendiary... No, not incendiary. Just thinking of the machine gun. The Saber rounds. And the Saber rounds obviously going to be very effective against the frontal armor of this Panzer IV. Remember, OKW Panzer IVs are more armored, more heavily armored than the Wehrmacht Panzer IV. So this Wehrmacht Panzer IV is not really going to be standing up very well to the 57mm anti-tank gun's fire. Now in the center, we do see an excellent sort of holding action coming in from Steel Dragon. He does have a few mines placed, which is really good. Looks like he also had something over here, but all of the mortar shells... Oh, it was the trench, right. I kind of forgot what it was over there. And you see that actually Battalion Ukraine went for both a lieutenant and a captain, getting no units out of the lieutenant, and I feel like that's obviously a mistake, because especially in the earlier stages of the game when you are behind, you really need to make the most use of the limited resources that you have to your advantage, especially when you don't have any fuel points. So having both the lieutenant and the captain is usually a luxury sort of reserved to the players who are going for the heavy cavalry company and are already kind of quite ahead, so they're going to be affording to wait for the Pershing. But at the same time, right now Battalion Ukraine really doesn't have that much, both in terms of units on the field and in terms of sort of hopes for the future, really, because he's only got the Easy 8s available to him in the late game, which are only going to be available to him once he actually buys the Major. Obviously, getting the Major out right now is going to be much more prohibitive because he wasted 50 fuel on the Lieutenant Tech, which is not exactly what he wanted to do right off the bat. If he wanted to go for the Captain and the Steward, then he should have gone that, you know, much earlier on, as his sort of friend has done. Red Howler has gone for the Captain earlier. He didn't go for a Steward, though, which is interesting. I feel like he would have been much better off for the Steward, because not only he had the tech earlier, he also had the terrain sort of more adapt to a unit like the Steward, because up here it's all an open field. So the mobility of the Steward is going to be much more well served in a big open plain than in this sort of clusterfuck of houses where a mine can easily cover an entire approach to an area. So you don't want Steward to be in a very enclosed sort of space such as this one, especially when you're facing against a superior vehicle like a Panzer IV. Now, there are some Obersoldaten on the field for Skrunderloh. Skrunderloh does have quite a lot of manpower, and I feel like his main mistake right now has been not really using his doctrinal abilities at all. I feel like he could have gone much more easily for a couple of Jaegers than a squad of Obersoldaten. Now, the Obersoldaten are going to be much more superior in the long term because of obviously their superior veterancy and their LMG being very, very effective at long range, much more so than the Jaegers. But I feel like a couple of Jaegers earlier on would have provided a little bit more of a much-needed sort of early-game boost to the capabilities of the infantry of Skrunderloh. But at the same time, they were winning anyway, so he could have afforded to wait for the bigger, more powerful unit. Something that the Allies right now cannot do, which is why also the Stuart is going to be in a little bit of trouble from the Panzer IV. Again, this Panzer IV has been on the field for like 4 minutes, and it's still sort of not been countered, which is obviously a bit of a problem for the Allies, because, well, they kind of need to counter this Panzer IV as quickly as possible, because soon enough there's going to be much more heavy vehicles coming in, such as this Panther from Skrunderloh. So definitely, they don't need to have problems with a Panzer IV when they're going to have problems with much more powerful units later on anyway. This kind of shows just how weak they are, and sort of goading the Germans into investing into more units. Actually, that was the second Panzer IV on the field from Steel Dragon. I feel like the second Panzer IV was kind of not needed. Right now up here, these Rangers will be able to easily take out these Volksgrenadiers, but the trees will actually save them with their sort of miraculous line of sight, actually helping them out in the last possible moment. Another flank coming in from the Americans. Red Howler getting his captain to work against some machine gun teams, and also these Grenadiers. Grenadiers will actually be able to do a lot of damage against the captain at this kind of range. But the arrival of these riflemen will actually kind of ruin their hopes and dreams forever, and that will be the end of that Grenadier squad. Unfortunate, because also this will allow the riflemen to actually pick up the light machine gun, which will be really good, because vet-free riflemen with both light machine gun, LMG-42, and the bar will be very dangerous to the Germans. But right now the Germans are sitting pretty because of their great VP lead. They're going to be very much in the lead for quite a long time, actually. Even if the Allies can sort of pull back and capture some VPs, they're still going to be at an advantage. Now, right now, the Panther from Skrunderloh is an interesting choice because the Allies don't have any fuel income and haven't had any fuel income for actually about 10 or 15 minutes. So definitely having that Panther on the field is more of a precaution against vehicles, but when the enemy cannot really get any vehicles, I still feel like it's a little bit of an overkill. Probably going for a King Tiger right now would have been a better decision for Skrunderloh, because he had the time to actually wait. The Panther being 200 fuel? 200 fuel would have, yeah, it set him back 200 fuel, which means that with 100 fuel in his reserve, he would have had 300 right now, which, considering the 50 price tag of the Actually, no, the 65 price tag if we consider the truck as well. Of Mechanized Regiment Headquarters plus truck, which is 15 plus 50, so 65. That would have meant that Skrunderlow would have been... the King Tiger is 325, right? I'm actually a little bit not sure about that. Haven't played with OKW, or sorry, with King Tigers in general quite a bit, so if it was 325, then right now Skrunderlow would have been about 60 fuel away from a King Tiger, 60 or 70 fuel away from a King Tiger, which would have been a couple of minutes, considering the staggering 38 fuel income for the Germans. A couple of fuel caches actually going up for Steel Dragon are providing a lot of income for the Germans, which is really good, especially when you have a lot of manpower such as the Germans have right now. Getting those fuel caches up and running is just a really good option to secure your late game and secure your sort of resource supplies for the later stages of the game. Now, as you can see, the Panther is struggling against the Allied infantry. Nice anti-tank rifle rain coming in from the from the Allied riflemen will provide the AT gun a few chances to get some pot shots in on the Panther. Unfortunately for the AT gun, the Panther was able to escape using some good shrubbery to actually conceal itself from the Allied troops. So that was gonna that was kind of the how should I say it? It was the condition over which the Panther was going to live, and that sort of allowed the Oberstland to work their magic against the Allied infantry, dealing a huge amount of damage against both the riflemen, the rangers, the rear echelons, and also the AT gun. Most importantly, the AT gun, because it was decrewed, and the AT gun was Vet 1, I believe. Either Vet 1 or Vet 2. And obviously taking out veteran AT guns is really, really important in general, because veterancy bonuses on AT guns are usually pretty good, but especially the American one, because at Vet 1 they do get that take aim ability, which is really, really useful. It's not as incredibly powerful as it was just a few patches ago. The last patch just removed it from a infinite ability where you activate it once and then be able to actually use it forever, into a duration 20 seconds ability, so sort of time limited skill. But it's still going to be very useful just to have it. And as you can see, these AT guns do gain veterancy quite quickly. However, at the same time, it's still going to take quite a while to get back to that level of veterancy that the Allies were able to actually get it to earlier on. Using the Major to actually capture the Northern VP is a really good decision, because right now the Allies are kind of struggling for VPs. They are at 90. And both the capture of the southern point, I'm not sure how, but they did it, and the capture of this first northern point are sort of saving themselves from quite a lot of trouble. I'm not sure what happened here. An MG team was destroyed, as the very sad Wehrmacht announcer was very quick to point out, but I'm not sure what kind of MG. And there's also 2 bunkers from Steel Dragon, which, while useful, I feel like they would be much more of a good thing in the south. They would be much more useful in the south, because the south is usually less contested in terms of actual enemy units. You want your bunkers to be in areas where the enemy is going to think of sending, for example, 1 squad just to cap, because that's where they're going to be most effective. In the center, where the enemy is going to have their main forces, the bunkers are not going to be that good, because the enemy is going to have artillery and is going to have AT guns, sort of long-range, specialized anti-building and anti-tank units that are able to outrange the bunker and easily destroy it. So that's, I feel like, a big mistake from Steel Dragon. That was 300 manpower and 120 munitions down the drain for him, which is, for the munitions, it's not really that big of a deal, because they have 42 munitions income. But for the manpower, right now Steel Dragon is actually hurting quite a bit, so he definitely does not need to be losing units, and he does not need to be wasting manpower on buildings that are going to go down in the front line anyway. And there's a second Panther from Skrunderlow. I feel like that's a big mistake. He could have definitely gone for a King Tiger right now, and right now the Allies have no counter to the King Tiger. They have a couple of AT guns, yes, of course, and the AT guns are going to be able to, if sort of focusing fire on the King Tiger, especially getting some flanking shots, they are going to be able to penetrate the King Tiger, deal a lot of damage against it. But alone, the AT guns are not going to be able to kill the King Tiger, because whenever you see the AT guns with your King Tiger, you can just move back. Very easily move back out of the range, repair, and then come in from another direction. Whereas if the enemy had, for example, some medium tanks or tank destroyers just to chase the King Tiger while it's damaged, then that would be a different story altogether. Now, in the north, we do see a good usage of a MG42 from Skrunderlo, actually taking it from his ally, but making it sort of work in his favor, putting it to good use. This is exactly the thing you want to do. Sometimes your allies will lose some units, especially with the support weapons. You don't want the enemy to actually get them. Like, it's okay to allow your ally to recapture his machine gun that was killed, but it's much more important to deny it to the enemy. Now, an Ostwind, I actually like the Ostwind a little bit more than the Panther, funnily enough, despite the fact that I usually bash on the Ostwind because I dislike it. But right now, the Ostwind is actually a pretty decent unit if you can keep it away from the AT guns. Right now, a mistake that the allies are doing is that they're using very cavalierly these saber rounds. Ooh, really good shot actually from the AT gun on the Ostwind. Ostwind was not able to actually retreat in time and was spotted by this ranger up here, which, well, pretty much spelled the end of that. And I feel like Skrunderlo should have definitely retreated the Ostwind with just the U command, just to reverse it, because it would have sort of prevented it from doing all those dance moves, just going back and forth trying to get a good pathfinding going. But yeah, that's not exactly what you want to do when your sort of life is on the line. You want to get the fuck out of there as quickly as possible. Now, obviously, right now Skrunderlo does have quite the hefty amount of resources in the bank, but that's still not going to be that important if he does not use them. Right now, Steel Dragon has purchased 2 more Panzer IVs, and that's a problem because there's a Pershing on the field for the enemy, and the Pershing is going to be able to deal with these Panzer IVs fairly easily if he can keep at long range. At long range, the Pershing is going to be able to use its armor to bounce off a lot of shots from these 75mm guns from the Panzer IVs. Remember, the farther away you are from an enemy unit, the harder is it going to be for them to actually penetrate your armor, because penetration falls off over range. Now, for a very powerful gun such as the 75mm on the Panther, that's not too much of a big deal. But for the 75mm on the Panzer IV, which is not quite as effective against vehicles, then that's a really big deal. Now, especially when the Pershing decides to actually show its very sexy ass to the Panzer IVs, that's not really going to be that big of an issue because the rear armor on the Pershing is not really that great. The frontal armor, in fact, is not really that great either. But, again, if you would have been able to keep that Pershing facing the enemy, with the front facing the enemy, that would have been much better. Now, oh, I'm sorry, just back in my microphone a little bit. But yeah, really, that engagement was very messy from both sides. Steel Dragon lost 2 Panzer IVs, which is 250 fuel, and his ally Skrunderlo lost a Panther, which is 200. So that was 450 fuel from the Germans lost. Comparatively, the Allies lost much less. They only lost 230 from the Pershing. However, the Axis do have quite a bit more in terms of resources to actually rebuild these units that they lost, because they had that much better income earlier on. So they could kind of afford the losses a little bit more, especially when you're taking out a unit such as the Pershing, and you're sacrificing tanks such as the Panzer IVs, which later on in the game are not really going to be that important. A much bigger loss, in my opinion, is the loss of this Obersoldaten squad, because the Obersoldaten were pretty much pivotal right now to the success of the Germans against the riflemen at long range in the north. Right now, lacking those Obersoldaten, Skrunderlo is pretty much only left with machine guns to be able to face the riflemen at longer ranges. At closer ranges, they're still going to have a lot of trouble because of the Rangers. Rangers obviously being very powerful at close range, and also the riflemen with the vet-free and the BRs. BRs, remember, much more effective than other light machine guns at close ranges, mostly because of the fact that their damage falls off much less at close range and is not as prominent at long range. So it's a bit of a trade-off with the BR, but at medium and closer ranges, they are very deadly, especially with pairs. 2 BRs and 3 Garands on a squad that's vet-free is very scary, even to a Stern Pioneer. Stern Pioneer with, obviously, very dedicated close to mid-range weapons, such as the STG-44s. Now, in the north, we see, again, the Panther driving right up to the American rifleman, eating an anti-tank rifle grenade, and being actually pounded on by the Jackson. Now, the 90mm gun on the Jackson is obviously very dangerous against the Panther, but I feel like in this situation, with all the trees that are around, the Jackson does not exactly want to get into close range with the Panther, because the Panther may turn a corner and, oh, what did you do? Let me chase around the corner, and surprise, there's a Panzerfaust or Panzerschreck equipped infantry squad from the Germans, And there goes your Jackson, because obviously the Jackson is very weak to infantry, partially because of the fact that it cannot at all deal damage to infantry, partially because of its very weak armor, sort of allowing Panzerfaust and Panzerschrecks to do a lot of damage and pretty much never be bounced off by the armor of the Jackson. Of course, right now the Germans are going to win by VPs, because the Allies really aren't putting as much focus as they could be on VPs. And as you can see, the bunker in the south has been doing much, much better than the one in the center. The one in the center, or sorry, the ones in the center, because there were two, both died, whereas this one in the south, because of the fact that the Allies cannot sort of put in as many units to the duty of actually taking out this bunker, because of the terrain that is on the south side of the map being very foresty, very hard for units to move in, you cannot commit as many units. So having that unit be sort of a nice bottleneck type deal, like in a bottleneck, covering that bottleneck and using that to your advantage, is much better than having the unit be sort of easily taken out in the center. Now, I'm not sure what these guys are doing. They were probably trying to get to this point, but at the same time, there's Schwer Panzer quarters from Skrundolo. So that's probably going to be it. Let's talk about mistakes. Battalion Ukraine hasn't used this doctrine at all. He went for one flamethrower on his rear echelons, but for all it did, it could have been nothing. So definitely not really the best thing out of Battalion Ukraine. Could have definitely done much better. Now, I'm not sure as to why he went for Rifle Company, but even going Rifle Company, he could have made better usage of the Rifle Company by going quickly to a Major, by either going only Lieutenant or only Captain, and then rushing for some Easy 8s. A couple of Easy 8s in the north would be fairly effective right now, because the Germans don't really have that many AT guns. AT guns are really the bane of the Easy 8, because of the fact that they aren't quite as effective against infantry and support weapons as the Sherman, and they aren't quite as effective at long range against enemy vehicles as the Jackson. So they cannot keep out of the range of the enemy tank guns, but they also cannot kill them as quickly in a stand-up fight. They need to flank. Even the Sherman is much better off flanking the AT guns, but sometimes you can just come up with Shermans and just plow through AT guns. You can just come in and pow. With the HE rounds, sometimes you can get the wipe on the AT gun in the first round, especially when you have more than one Sherman. You cannot do that with the Easy 8. You need to flank, and you need to use the pintle-mounted machine guns to your advantage. So that's why Battalion Ukraine should have gone for that instead of what he did. Now, he could have also gone for another doctrine, or he could have gone for some Jacksons while being with the Rifle Company, but it's not really at all efficient. Rifle Company is really made to be used with the Easy 8s. Now, Red Howler, a lot of floating from him, because he was obviously saving for the Pershing, but again, I've talked about this many times. When you're saving for the big tank, you don't need to be saving both manpower and fuel. You're only going to be needing to save the fuel, because the manpower is going to come back pretty quickly. You have a lot of income for that. You're going to have enough. Even if you aren't willing to go under the 600 price tag of the Pershing, just use those extra 400 manpower that you have for something. You could have right now gotten an AT gun. You could have gotten, well, you couldn't have gotten actually a machine gun because you don't have the lieutenant here, but you could have gotten a pack howitzer. Pack howitzer would have been really useful against these support weapons that the Germans were using, especially these MG42s that were giving you such a hard time pushing in the north. So that's probably the best thing that he could have done to turn it around for himself. The infantry composition that he had was pretty good. 3 riflemen, 1 captain, and 1 ranger is pretty much a very versatile and very effective fighting force. I feel like a couple of rear echelons equipped with bazookas would have been also pretty good for him. And also, using his Pershing a little recklessly would have been much needed for him, because he kind of just charges Pershing in. That's not the way you use the Pershing. The way you use the Pershing is you have it sit back, you have it snipe. Because, again, the armor on it is not as powerful as it would be on another heavy tank such as the King Tiger, or, hell, even the IS-2. In fact, the IS-2 I feel like has the same armor as the King Tiger. Don't quote me on this. But yeah, those heavy tanks are much more effective in the breakthrough role. Just coming in first, absorbing some damage, dealing some damage in return, pulling out, repairing. Whereas the Pershing, you'd really want it to be behind your other units sniping. It's sort of a Jackson that can survive and can fight infantry. It can engage infantry a little bit better than the Jackson because of its HE potential on the gun. And it can fight vehicles because of the HVAP rounds that the Pershing has. That's how you want to use the Pershing, not as a sort of spearhead. Steel Dragon, going for all the Panzer IVs does feel like a mistake, especially a couple of Ostrupen Doctrine. Ostrupen Doctrine sometimes really requires you to go tier 4 for that heavy late game presence that the tier 4 actually provides you with the Panthers. The Panthers and obviously the Brumbear as well. The Brumbear would have been really, really effective against especially the sort of more defensive playstyle of Battalion Ukraine, but also would have been very effective against the infantry, more infantry-focused playstyle of Red Howler. Because the Brumbear obviously being very effective against buildings, very effective against infantry and support weapons, would have been perfect in this match, especially due to the lack of AT that the Allies kind of showed. The AT guns are very, very vulnerable to actually the fire of the Brumbear, especially when the Brumbear gets to Vet 1, you can use that artillery ability to take out those AT guns from long range. That would have been really good for them. Other than that, I feel like he used his Panzer IVs quite recklessly as well, but at least he did not waste them. When he kind of charged them in, it was to trade for the Pershing. It wasn't just as a, whatever, let's just move in. No. It actually had a purpose, and it served that purpose, and it did well. Skrunderlo, I wasn't actually able to follow him much, which is a bit of a shame. I feel like his infantry play was fine. Sometimes he lost some squads, but that's whatever. You're gonna get better at that with practice. No real problem. What I really feel like was his mistake is going for all those Panthers. All those Panthers were really not that important in his game plan. Or, sorry, they shouldn't have been that important in his game plan. They were that important, but it's a mistake because of the fact that he really, really needed, in some capacity, some kind of anti-infantry heavy unit. Now, he did have a little bit of that in form of the support gun, which got 19 kills, and in form of the MGs that he was able to steal/secure from his ally. He actually went for MG34 at the later stages of the game as well, but it didn't do anything, which is unfortunate. So yeah, that did provide a little bit of anti-infantry firepower for him, but I still feel like the Panthers were just not in the correct match for Panthers. You want Panthers when the enemy is going for a lot of enemy. He's going for a lot of medium tanks. Well, for a lot of tanks in general, but especially medium tanks. So if you see some of that, then yes, going for a Panther is quite good. But if the enemy is mostly going for infantry and support weapons, you can sort of imagine that they're either not really thinking about what they're going to get because they're going to be saving for a big vehicle, or because they are very much resource starved. In this case, it was actually both for Red Howler. He was resource starved because Skrunderlo was able to quite effectively keep control of the fuel point, which was very pivotal to the actual German success in this match. But at the same time, Skrunderlo, while holding the northern fuel point, he wasn't really able to actually sort of draw the correct conclusion from that, which is the fact that the Allies are going to have a lot less fuel to actually get out those vehicles. So getting anti-vehicle tanks when the enemy is being starved out by yourself is kind of counterproductive sometimes. However, I feel like in general he did pretty well, and also the fact that he kind of picked a doctrine that he didn't really use kind of gets excused by the fact that he was able to use his infantry well, and he, most importantly, kind of understood what he actually had to do in the area of the map that he was in. Because of all the machine guns that he actually ended up acquiring and using effectively, I feel like he understands the way you need to play on this map a little bit better than Red Howler, who went for the captain and all the infantry, which are much more useful in the south part of the map than in north. So I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the cast, and I'll see you soon.